All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
Phil, I thought we'd do something a little bit different today. And Tanya, I'd love to have you chime in as well. But given where we are at this time of the year, I think we're about 5-6 weeks away from the presidential election. Weird election season. Of course, just not as much banter out there maybe as in past years. Not as many yard signs out there as in past years. But I think things are really going to heat up in the last few weeks down the home stretch here, and we've already seen some shocking events take place between the primary candidate on the left dropping out, the primary candidate Trump on the right being two attempts at assassination. So I do think that there's going to be a lot more coming down the pike in these last few weeks. But hey, I'm just one opinion out there. But what I thought we would do is take a little bit deeper dive into regulating political expression in the workplace. Rather than covering our, general 2, 3, 4 topics, we'll take a crack at this first topic. And this this segment is really targeted most at private sector employers. And I want to make it very clear that the First Amendment, the constitutional First Amendment, does not protect political speech in private workplaces. So in the public sector, a little bit different, quite a bit different actually. But in the private sector, the First Amendment does not apply. So
you're saying, Burt, if I'm talking to a group of employees and somebody's getting upset because I'm trying to cool the conversation in the workplace and refocus it back on productivity, and someone goes, hey, it's my First Amendment. There's freedom of speech here. I can say what I want, when I want to say it, where I want to say it.
That's right. You have the right to say the First Amendment. I'm not a governmental agency that's regulating political speech, and so my rules apply over the First Amendment here in the workplace.
All right. Yeah. Now, not everybody knows that. I'm clearly aware of that because I do hear that quite a bit from people of all levels, management, and often management's not aware of, well, what can I say? What should I say? And that is going to really get into an issue of trust that we're going to talk with Tanya about as well, being informed. So go on, Burt, I'm sorry.
So that's all right. So most states allow, therefore, the employers, private sector employers, to regulate employees' political activities, with some exceptions that I'll talk about in a minute, that protect against discrimination based on political affiliation. Now, employers definitely can engage in political discussions if they want to and express their views, but they have to be very careful about to avoid coercing their employees regarding voting. States that have laws to prevent retaliation against employees for political expression, there's several of them, but also importantly, employers also have the right not to engage in political expression in the workplace. So, my opinion on this is that employers are made up of many different employees with different types of beliefs. Most employers are out there, for-profit, nonprofit. They have clients, they have customers, and they come from all over the political spectrum. And so as an employer, I always encourage employers to avoid wading into this. Now, there's a couple of other things that you have to be really careful of. First of all, the National Labor Relations Act, that protects employees who engage in political activities if those political activities relate to their working conditions, their terms and conditions of employment. So if they're engaged in a political activity because they think you pay an unfair wage, and they want to engage in political expression because they believe one party is going to advocate for increasing the wages, if they tie that to their terms and conditions of employment, employers really have to be careful how they handle those political discussions to avoid violating employees.
Okay, great. So this is good, right? So I have heard both candidates say now that we would like to not tax restaurant tip workers. You get your tips, they're not taxed. And let's just hypothetically say I put a Trump badge on or a Harris badge on, either way. because I'm in favor as a restaurant worker of not being taxed on my tips. And the workers or the employer says, hey, you got to take that off while we're working.
Yeah, so the employer can definitely tell the employee to take the badge off or the insignia off, especially if it's interfering or not part of the uniform. But you know, just because if you get beyond the badge, then into discussion, if they're tying that political discussion to their terms and conditions of employment, I think the employer has to allow that. There have been some cases that have gone back and forth at the NLRB with employees in particular during the Black Lives Matters protests several years ago. They several employees at Home Depot and I think it was Starbucks as well had insignia, Black Lives Matter insignia on their uniforms, and the cases have kind of gone back and forth on this. I do believe ultimately when this gets into the court system that the courts are going to say that the employer has a right to protect their uniform. But as far as political expression in the workplace, again, if they're tying it to their terms and conditions of employment, we can't discriminate or retaliate against that.
So
the other one
I have
is
another question here for you, Burt. So as I drive across the country from time to time, going to these strange places where I walk in, and there you are, and there might be like a phrase for that. You know, I'm not sure if you're harassing me, following me, whatever that is. But anyway,
hey, if you're walking in and I'm already there, you're following me.
yeah. What about a scenario of and I'm not just trying to create scenarios. These are things that come to mind as you talk about it that represent employers that we work with. So we work with several farms, and they produce produce or meats and packing and these types of things, and they may have on their barn on the top, they might have big Trump letters up on top of their barn. And so the employer in this case is promoting their political expression. Does that give a farm worker the right then to equally promote their political expression?
No, it still does not. Again,
Okay.
the farm worker, if they can promote their political expression if they're tying their political expression to their terms and conditions of employment.
Gotcha.
Okay, so there's a distinction there. Again, like I said, employers can engage, employers can engage in political expression, but they also have the right to refrain from doing that. If an employer chooses to do that, that's their choice as an organization, and employees can counter speak to that if it is tied to their terms and conditions of employment. Okay.
Right.
So there's
Now
also
that one last question. I know you got a lot you want to get to. Now
I
that
do.
applies to those protected, I'm assuming, under the National Relations Act, right? NLRA.
The National Labor Relations Act, correct.
So for those that are not protected by the act, is the rules different? I've been in businesses as part of management where I've been highly encouraged to donate to political campaigns and different causes that would be in the best interest of the business. And of course, you know, we wouldn't necessarily do that for those protected by the act. Is there a gray area, or is it left undecided as it relates to those not protected by the act?
Yeah, so Phil, I think when you're talking about those not protected by the act, you're talking about people who are excluded from the act, which are supervisors in this case. And so what you're describing is a situation where the employer goes to its managerial level employees and says, hey, we want you to contribute to this political campaign. And if you don't, you're going to get discharged. And so again, I would encourage employers to wade very carefully in doing that. There's nothing that prohibits an employer from encouraging its employees from contributing to a campaign or a political party. But there are other protections out there. There's also EEO concerns. There's state law concerns about that. In particular, well, let me talk about the EEO concerns first. So political discussions can obviously lead to claims of discrimination, harassment, especially if they intersect with protected characteristics like race or gender. And so employers also need to be really careful to navigate the tensions between the EEO laws as well and political expression in the workplace. Now, there are several states out there that have enacted laws prohibiting mandatory meetings about political topics and protecting employees' off-duty political activities. Those laws provide varying degrees of protection for employees' rights to express their political views. Not surprisingly, when you hear this list, you won't be surprised about some of these states on here, in particular, California, Colorado, Connecticut, DC, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington. Now, those states' laws that prohibit discrimination based on political affiliation or protect employees from retaliation for political activities and discussions, they vary. They vary from state to state. And the only one that I named off there that you have members in is Illinois. And so Illinois does have a law that protects employees from discrimination based on their political activities and their affiliations. And so, again, you need to check the state law on this. And that would include employees have the right to express their political views and engage in political activities outside of work without fear of retaliation. That would include the right to campaign for candidates or causes, but that does not protect the employees in the workplace while they're working. So, but employers also, excuse me, are prohibited from taking adverse action against employees based on their political expression, including termination, demotion, or harassment. So employers in Illinois need to be very, very careful. The last thing I'll leave you with here are two things. First of all, social media and off-duty conduct. Employees increasingly use social media for political expression, and employers must be very careful not to infringe on privacy laws or retaliate for speech, off-duty speech. So the best practice I could recommend would include drafting clear or communicating clear policies on political speech. Very importantly, consistent enforcement of those policies, training for management, and being prepared for potential disruptions related to political discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a really good reminder, Burt. No doubt it does heat up, and I do get questions about it, and it comes up as part of a conversation.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link aimea.org/thisweekatwork, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.